Imagine this every time you make a choice that pulls you away from the light, from the divine guidance of spirit. There's a ripple in the universe. What if I told you that when we sin, God feels it deeply, not in anger, not in condemnation, but in a way that only a creator could? It's like a parent watching their beloved child walk into danger. Stay with me here, because this isn't about guilt, this is about understanding the profound depths of God's love for you. What I'm about to share will change the way you see your relationship with Him and how you move forward in your spiritual journey. As you listen, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Cosmic Harmony, and leave a comment with 77 to signal the universe that you're ready for transformation. Play this on repeat to absorb every ounce of energy and truth being shared here. Chapter 1: God's Heart. When we fall, when we sin, it's natural to picture God as a stern judge, ready to hand down punishment. But that image doesn't reflect His true nature. The reality is so much deeper, more loving, and more profound than we often imagine. God's heart doesn't harden when we stray, it aches. He doesn't experience anger the way we humans understand it. Instead, His sorrow comes from knowing the weight of the consequences we face when we step out of alignment with His divine plan. Imagine God as a parent watching their child wander into danger. The parent doesn't react with anger, they ache. They long to protect, to guide, to bring the child back to safety. This is how God feels when we stray. Sin isn't just about breaking rules, it's about severing the connection between us and the flow of divine love, guidance, and purpose that God has woven into our lives. When we turn away, we create a gap, a distance in that connection, and God feels that separation not because He is powerless, but because His love for us is infinite. He understands the cost of our choices, even when we don't. And yet, His response isn't condemnation. It's a desperate longing to bring us back into His embrace. Think about the parable of the lost sheep. The shepherd leaves the 99 to find the one that has wandered away. That's God's heart for you. When you sin, He doesn't abandon you, He goes searching, calling out to your spirit, reminding you of your worth and your place in His kingdom. God's love isn't transactional, it's unconditional. It doesn't fluctuate based on your actions. In fact, His love intensifies in the moments you feel furthest from Him because He knows you're worth fighting for. His love is persistent, personal. He doesn't see humanity as just a whole, He sees you, your every thought, every action, and every struggle. You matter to Him more than you can possibly imagine. When you fall, He doesn't see a failure, He sees a soul worth redeeming, a life worth restoring. Let's make this personal. Reflect for a moment on a time in your life when you felt lost. Maybe your choices or circumstances created a distance between you and God. Close your eyes and picture that moment. Now, imagine God standing right beside you, not with arms crossed in judgment, but with arms open, ready to pull you back in. He's not shouting accusations. He's whispering words of love, calling you back to Him. How does it feel to know that, even in your lowest moments, God has never given up on you? You are always worth His pursuit, always worthy of His embrace. In your darkest hour, He sees your potential, He sees your worth, and He never stops loving you. Here's a practical exercise to deepen this understanding. Take a few moments each day to reflect on God's unyielding love. Even in your struggles and mistakes, remind yourself that He is right there, not judging you, but calling you back, ready to hold you close. Let this truth sink in. God's love for you is not based on your perfection, but on your worth as His beloved child. Are you ready to embrace this divine love and live your life from a place of unconditional grace and healing? Let this be the foundation of your transformation. Take a moment to reflect quietly and grab a journal. Write a letter to God, expressing a time when you felt distant from Him. Be raw and honest about your emotions, whether it's guilt, shame, confusion, or even frustration. Let it all pour out onto the page. Then, imagine what God's response might be, speaking directly to you. What would He say? Picture His voice gentle, loving, and filled with understanding. He's not condemning you for your mistakes, but instead reminding you that His grace is greater than any error you've made. His love is unwavering, even when you feel far from Him. In fact, His love is always close, watching every step you take, and even when you wander, He's gently guiding you back. God's love for you isn't based on your performance, it's unconditional. It's the type of love that sees your potential even when all you can see are your flaws. It's the love that waits patiently, no matter how long it takes for you to return to Him. When we fall, it's not the end of our journey, it's simply a detour. And every detour holds the potential for redemption. God doesn't just want you to come back, He wants to walk with you through the process of restoration. No matter how small your step toward Him may be, He sees it and celebrates it. Heaven rejoices when even one soul turns back, and that includes you. Think of the story of the prodigal son. The son expected judgment and rejection, but what did he receive instead? His father ran to him, embraced him, and celebrated his return. This is a perfect picture of God's heart towards you. He doesn't want to keep track of your flaws or count your mistakes. Instead, His desire is to heal the wounds caused by sin, to guide you back into alignment with His divine plan, and to remind you of the incredible purpose He has set for your life. This isn't about earning God's love. It's about realizing that His love has always been there, waiting for you to come home. When we fall, God doesn't focus on the fall itself, He focuses on how He can lift us back up. He sees the lessons we can learn, the strength we can gain, and the faith we can build through the process of restoration. His grace transforms our failures into stepping stones that lead us closer to Him. His love is your constant, unshakable foundation, always present, always forgiving, and always ready to welcome you back into His embrace. Take this truth with you: God's heart when you fall is not filled with anger or disappointment. Instead, it is filled with love, longing, and an unrelenting desire to see you restored. The moment you take a step back toward Him, you'll find that He's already been running toward you, arms wide open, ready to welcome you home. Trust in this love, chosen one, and know that no matter how far you wander, God's heart will always be waiting for you. Chapter 2: The Weight of Sin and God's Patience. When we think of sin, it's easy to focus on the guilt and shame it brings. But Spirit wants you to see a different perspective, the way sin impacts God's heart, and the incredible patience He shows in the face of it. Sin creates a barrier between you and God, a distance He never intended for you to experience. He feels the burden it places on your soul, and He knows how it dims your inner light. Yet, even in the midst of your struggles, God waits for you. His patience is unwavering. Imagine for a moment what it must feel like for God to watch His creation full of potential stumble into choices that harm their spirit. It's not anger that fills Him, it's sorrow and compassion. He knows what you're capable of, the destiny He's placed within you, and how sin tries to pull you away from it. But instead of condemning you, God waits. He waits for the moment your heart turns back to Him. And when it does, He's ready to embrace you without hesitation. In a world that demands quick fixes and immediate results, God's approach is refreshingly different. His patience isn't born out of obligation, it's born of love. The love that sees the bigger picture, the love that believes in you, even when you may have lost faith in yourself. It's a patience that transcends time and circumstance, and it's available to you always. For me, this speaks volumes about God's nature. We live in a fast-paced world where everything is instant, and the pressure to succeed quickly often overwhelms us. But God's patience invites us to slow down, to embrace the process of growth and healing. It teaches us that there is beauty in the journey, not just the destination. His patience isn't about rushing you, it's about giving you space to learn, to grow, and to rediscover your connection with Him. That's a love that changes everything. God sees you as a masterpiece in progress, not a finished product. Each detour you take, every stumble you experience, and even the moments when you stray from His guidance are met with His steadfast commitment to you. He understands that the road to transformation is not always linear, and He walks beside you every step of the way. The truth is, God doesn't expect perfection, but He has an unwavering belief in your ability to grow and evolve. Here's an exercise for you to reflect deeply on this truth. Close your eyes and picture God sitting beside you silently as you wrestle with your choices. Visualize His face, not one of judgment or disappointment, but one filled with deep love and understanding. Imagine the warmth in His eyes, the gentle reassurance in His presence. How does it feel to know that even when you're not at your best, He's still there patiently waiting for you to reach out to Him? His patience isn't passive, it's active and alive. Every time you feel a nudge to turn away from sin, or when your conscience whispers a better path, that's God speaking directly to you. He's working within you, guiding you gently back to His truth. God doesn't rush you or force you, He lovingly invites you back, showing you that His love isn't conditional upon your perfection, but rooted in His unchanging eternal nature. Think for a moment about the countless ways His patience has manifested in your life. Perhaps there were times when you stood at the crossroads of a decision you knew wasn't right, but someone intervened, steering you toward a better choice. That was God's hand. Or in moments when you felt overwhelmed by shame, yet somehow a glimmer of hope kept you from giving up. That too was God's Spirit reminding you of your worth. His patience is not passive, it's actively working behind the scenes, orchestrating opportunities for you to return to Him. This is the beauty of God's patience. It doesn't merely wait, but works, even when you feel the furthest from Him. His Spirit is still stirring within you, gently whispering who you are and whose you are. Sin may try to convince you that you're unworthy, that you've strayed too far, but God's patience proves otherwise. It shows that He sees beyond your mistakes and into the person He created you to be. Reflect on this truth. God's patience is not a sign of weakness or tolerance of sin. Rather, it's a powerful reflection of His eternal love and His belief in your ability to overcome. God doesn't want you to stay in a place of guilt or regret. He desires for you to rise, to learn, and to take steps closer toward the purpose He has set for your life. His patience is a constant reminder that no matter how far you've wandered, you're never too far to return. God's patience isn't a sign of indifference, it's a testament to His love. He waits for you because He knows your worth, and He will never stop calling you back into His embrace.
Sin may create distance, but it can never diminish the depth of His love for you. He is the Father waiting with open arms, the shepherd searching for the lost sheep, and the Creator who knows the beauty within you, even when you can't see it yourself. So, chosen one, let this chapter remind you, no matter where you are on your journey, God's patience is your constant companion. It is a reflection of His unwavering commitment to you and His belief in the greatness He has placed within you. Trust in His patience. Let it draw you closer, and know that His love will always be greater than any mistake you've made.
Chapter 3: The Grace That Covers Your Flaws. When we fall into sin, it's easy for the enemy to whisper lies into our minds. You've gone too far, he says. You've messed up too much. These lies only deepen our feelings of guilt and shame, convincing us that we are beyond redemption. But let's challenge this perspective. Yes, sin may create a temporary separation between us and God, but it can never erase the truth of who we are in His eyes. The grace of God covers our flaws, our mistakes, and even our darkest moments. This grace isn't about ignoring our sins or pretending they don't matter. It's about acknowledging our shortcomings and choosing to receive God's mercy and forgiveness. God's grace doesn't just wipe the slate clean, it empowers us to rise again, to learn from our missteps, and to move forward with the assurance that we are still loved, still cherished, and still worthy of His presence. In my own journey, I found that the moments when I felt most unworthy of God's love were often the moments when His grace shone the brightest. It wasn't a grace that condoned my mistakes, but one that gently pulled me out of the darkness and into His light. It's this grace that gives us the strength to keep going, even when we feel like we've failed. When we stumble, it's not the end of the road, it's simply a chance to experience God's grace anew, to rise again with renewed strength. Take a moment and reflect on the times in your life when you felt like you had fallen too far. How did God's grace show up in those moments? Maybe it was through the kindness of a friend, a timely word of encouragement, or simply a moment of peace amidst the chaos. Those are all signs of God's grace at work in your life. His grace covers you, protects you, and heals you no matter what you've done or where you've been. Trust in this grace, chosen one. It's not just a one-time gift, it's an ongoing reality that is available to you at all times. It's the grace that enables you to stand up after every fall, the grace that fills in the gaps when you feel inadequate, and the grace that reminds you that no matter what, you are deeply loved. Let that grace be the foundation upon which you build your life, knowing that with every stumble you can always return to the embrace of a loving and forgiving God. God's grace is often misunderstood or even doubted in moments of deep failure or struggle. The enemy whispers lies, telling us that we've gone too far, messed up too badly, or that we've strayed so far from God that there's no chance of redemption. But Spirit is here to remind you of one unshakable truth: God's grace is infinite. It has no boundaries, no conditions, and no expiration date. No matter how far you've wandered, no matter how deep your mistakes run, His grace runs deeper still. Grace isn't just a safety net we rely on in our weakest moments. It's the very foundation that holds us steady, even in the storms. It doesn't wait for you to be perfect or for you to clean up your mess before stepping in. Instead, grace meets you right where you are in your pain, in your regret, in your brokenness. It's the steady hand that reaches into the chaos of life, pulling you back into the light, even when you feel unworthy or ashamed. Grace steps in and whispers, "You are still mine. Come back to me." Think about the times when you felt overwhelmed by the weight of your choices, burdened by guilt, only to experience a peace you couldn't have imagined possible. That's grace. Reflect on moments when God or others have extended forgiveness to you, even when you felt you didn't deserve it. That too is grace at work. It's not just passive forgiveness, it's a relentless force that pursues you, surrounds you, and refuses to let you go, no matter how many times you stumble. God's grace doesn't simply tolerate your imperfections, it transforms them. Imagine a sculptor chiseling away at a rough block of stone. With each careful stroke, the stone is shaped into a beautiful masterpiece. In much the same way, God's grace works in your life. It doesn't erase your past, nor does it dismiss the pain or mistakes you've made. Instead, grace redeems your past and uses the broken, painful, and messy parts of your life to create something new, something beautiful and meaningful. Grace doesn't just cover your flaws, it reshapes them into a testimony of God's goodness and love. This concept of grace is not a passive one. It's transformative. God's grace doesn't just sit back and wait for us to get it right, it works in the background, shaping our hearts, our minds, and our lives. Grace doesn't see our failures as permanent, it sees the possibility for redemption in every stumble. It's a constant, unwavering presence that encourages us to rise again, no matter how far we've fallen. Here's an exercise to help you reconnect with this powerful truth. Take a moment to reflect on a time when you felt undeserving of God's love or forgiveness, yet still experienced His grace in your life. Maybe it was a second chance in a relationship, an opportunity you thought was lost forever, or perhaps a quiet sense of peace in the midst of turmoil. Write it down. Let that moment serve as a reminder that God's grace didn't fail you then, and it won't fail you now. Sin may tell you that you're stuck, that your mistakes are too great to overcome. It will convince you that you've ruined everything, but grace whispers freedom into your spirit. It says, you are not your mistakes. You are not defined by your past. You are free and you are loved. Grace offers a different narrative, one of hope and restoration, where your flaws are not the end of your story, but the beginning of a new chapter where God's goodness shines brighter than ever before. In my own life, I've come to realize that grace is not just a one-time offering, it's an ongoing gift that is always available, even when we feel far from God. Grace doesn't just meet us in our darkest moments, it helps us grow and evolve. It transforms our struggles into opportunities for growth.
When I reflect on my own journey, I see how many times God's grace has shown up when I least expected it. And even when I felt unworthy, that same grace helped me rediscover hope, faith, and purpose. This is what grace does. It lifts us when we fall, heals us when we're broken, and reminds us that we are always loved, always forgiven, and never beyond the reach of His mercy.
So let this truth sink in. God's grace is always greater than any mistake, any regret, or any failure. It's the steady hand that reaches down and lifts you up, the love that never runs out, and the power that transforms your imperfections into something beautiful. Let this grace be the foundation of your life, and trust that no matter what you've done or how far you've strayed, God's love and grace will always be there, ready to redeem and restore. Grace isn't just about erasing the past, it's about empowering you for the future. It equips you with the strength, wisdom, and courage to move forward with a heart that is aligned with God's purpose. Every step you take in grace deepens your faith and brings you closer to the life He is calling you to live. It is a force that doesn't merely forgive but also transforms, shaping you into someone who lives with intention and purpose. To really internalize this truth, try this simple yet profound exercise. Find a quiet space, close your eyes, and speak these words aloud. God, I thank You for Your grace that never gives up on me. I surrender my flaws, my fears, and my failures into Your hands. Transform me, guide me, and help me walk in the freedom Your grace provides. Let these words sink deep into your spirit as a declaration of trust in God's unending love. Grace doesn't just free you from guilt, it changes the way you see yourself. It reminds you that your worth is not defined by your mistakes but by God's unbreakable love for you. Through grace you begin to see yourself as He sees you, redeemed, cherished, and full of untapped potential. You realize that your value doesn't come from what you've done, but from whose you are. This shift in perspective is nothing short of life-changing, setting you free from the chains of shame and self-doubt. God's grace is a gift you can't earn, and you can never repay. It isn't given to you because of what you've done or who you are, but because of who He is: merciful, loving, and faithful beyond measure. And the best part? Grace isn't a limited resource. It's infinite, overflowing, and available to you at every moment. It's the steady current that pulls you back toward Him, no matter how far you drift. Take this to heart. God's grace doesn't see you as broken beyond repair, it sees you as a masterpiece in progress. Each time you stumble, His grace is there to catch you, lift you up, and set you back on the right path. You are not your mistakes. You are His beloved child, covered in grace. Nothing can separate you from His love. So whenever you feel unworthy or burdened by guilt, remember this grace isn't about what you deserve, it's about what God desires for you. And He desires freedom, joy, and purpose for your life. Let His grace be your guide as you step boldly into the future He's calling you toward. This is the power of grace. It doesn't just cover your flaws, it transforms your life and restores your soul. Embrace it fully, for it is the key to living in the freedom and love of your Creator. Chapter 4. The consequences God wants to protect you from. Sin doesn't just create distance between you and God, it infiltrates every aspect of your life. It ripples outward, touching your relationships, your emotional stability, and even your physical well-being. When God grieves over sin, it's not out of anger or desire for punishment, it's because He knows the pain you're about to face. He desperately wants to shield you from it. Imagine a parent watching their child about to touch a flame, knowing the pain that will follow. That's how God feels when we choose sin. It's not about disappointment in you, it's heartbreak over the hurt you're about to experience. His commandments are not arbitrary rules, they're a roadmap, guiding you toward a life full of His blessings and free from unnecessary pain. Think back to a moment in your life when you made a choice that led you into pain or regret. Perhaps you ignored a warning, stepped into a relationship or situation that wasn't right, or made a decision that set you back. Now imagine how God felt in that moment. He wasn't angry at you, He was sorrowful for the consequences you would face, because He sees the bigger picture and He knows what's best for you. God doesn't want you to feel condemned. He wants you to understand that sin, while it may seem harmless or even pleasurable in the moment, brings with it consequences that are far more damaging than we realize. Every time we stray from His plan for us, we open the door to hurt, heartache, and unnecessary suffering. His heart is for your protection and well-being, and His grace is the way back to His loving embrace. Don't let sin steal your peace or derail your purpose. His commandments are a gift, a blueprint for living in harmony with His love, peace, and purpose. Trust that God's way is the path to a life that is filled with joy, fulfillment, and freedom from the pain that sin so often brings.
When a decision leads to a series of consequences that are hard to bear, it can be overwhelming. Maybe it was a choice that strained a relationship, caused deep regret, or created a cycle of anxiety and guilt. In those moments, imagine God witnessing your pain, feeling sorrow not because of condemnation, but because His love longs to see you thrive. He watches you endure hardship and wishes He could spare you from the consequences of your choices. His grief isn't rooted in disappointment, but in His deep desire for you to walk in alignment with the joy and peace He has planned for your life.
Take a moment to reflect, identify one area in your life where you still feel the weight of sin's consequences. Write it down, and then ask yourself, what's one action I can take today to begin the healing process? It might be seeking forgiveness from someone you've hurt, making amends, or simply praying for wisdom. Taking that first step, no matter how small, is an act of trust in God's ability to restore and redeem.